Allison, 34. Never imagined her career as a senior IRS accountant would collide with family drama. My brother-in-law, Timothy, married Regina, a woman who turned every family gathering into a competition. Regina's successful real estate development company gave her endless ammunition against my boring government job. Tonight's annual family dinner at their mansion was supposed to be different. I'd recently been assigned to audit a major company for suspected tax fraud. What I didn't know was that company belonged to Regina. When she sneered, "She's just a simple accountant," I wanted to disappear. Before I dive into this wild story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and if this opening caught your interest, please hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see what happened when that federal investigator knocked on the door just as Regina was in the middle of mocking my career. My relationship with Regina has been complicated since I married Marcus 5 years ago. Marcus is wonderful, compassionate, intelligent, and supportive in most ways. But when it comes to standing up to his sister Regina, he falls painfully short. I've lost count of how many times I've watched him shrink into silence while Regina takes shots at my career, my clothes, even our modest 3-bedroom house that we're actually quite proud of. Regina never misses an opportunity to remind everyone that her real estate development company, Crown Heights Properties, grossed 8 figures last year. She and Timothy live in a sprawling 6-bedroom mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood in town, drive matching luxury SUVs, and vacation in places most people only see in magazines. Their lifestyle is the antithesis of our comfortable but decidedly middle-class existence. I'm not ashamed of my career. I worked hard for my CPA certification and specialized in forensic accounting because I believe in financial integrity. 3 months ago, I received a promotion to senior investigative accountant at the IRS, a position that came with more responsibility and a modest pay increase that Marcus and I celebrated with a nice dinner and a bottle of wine we'd been saving. What makes Regina's condescension especially irritating is that she knows very little about what I actually do. In my role, I investigate complex financial crimes and help bring tax evaders to justice. It's challenging, important work that requires significant expertise. But I've always kept the details of my cases private, maintaining a strict separation between my professional and personal life. 2 weeks ago, my boss Gerald called me into his office with unusual urgency. "Allison, I'm assigning you as lead on the Crown Heights investigation," he said, sliding a thick folder across his desk. "The preliminary work suggests serious discrepancies. If what we're seeing is accurate, we could be looking at deliberate tax evasion in the millions." I remember feeling a surge of excitement. This was exactly the kind of high-profile case that could establish my reputation in the department. I spent the following days combing through preliminary reports, bank statements, and property transfers, building a comprehensive picture of the company's financial activities over the past 5 years. "This investigation needs to be airtight," Gerald had warned. "Crown Heights has connections in high places, and they'll fight back hard if we move forward with charges." I threw myself into preparations, working late most nights, creating detailed spreadsheets and analysis frameworks. Marcus was supportive, bringing dinner to my home office and giving me space to focus. "This could be a game changer for your career," he said one night, massaging my tense shoulders. "I'm proud of you." The investigation was scheduled to begin formally the following Tuesday, with an on-site visit to Crown Heights headquarters. As the date approached, my anxiety mixed with determination. This case could define my professional reputation for years to come. When Marcus reminded me about his sister's annual family dinner that weekend, I almost canceled. The timing couldn't have been worse. I needed the weekend to finalize my approach to the investigation. But Marcus insisted it was important we attend. "She's still my sister, and it's tradition," he pleaded. "Just a few hours, then you can get back to work." I relented, hoping that for once we might have a pleasant evening without Regina's subtle digs and condescension. Perhaps the significance of my upcoming case would give me the confidence to weather her comments with more grace than usual. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have imagined, was that Crown Heights Properties, the company I'd been preparing to investigate for weeks, was Regina's company. The realization would turn a routine family dinner into the most professionally and personally complicated night of my life. The drive to Regina and Timothy's house was tense. Marcus kept glancing over at me as I stared out the window, mentally rehearsing how I would respond if Regina started in on me again. "I promise I'll say something if she gets out of line tonight," Marcus said, reaching for my hand. I gave his fingers a light squeeze but didn't respond. I'd heard that promise before. Their mansion loomed at the end of a curved driveway, a sprawling Tudor-style home with perfectly manicured grounds and a fountain in the center of the circular drive. 2 luxury cars were already parked beside Regina's Range Rover and Timothy's Mercedes. "Deep breaths," Marcus whispered as we approached the oversized front door. "It's just dinner." Regina opened the door, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. "There you are," she exclaimed, air-kissing Marcus on both cheeks before giving me a quick, perfunctory hug. "Everyone's already here."
Come in.
The foyer opened to a 2-story great room where 8 family members were gathered, drinks in hand. I recognized Marcus's cousins Judith and Gabriel with their spouses, his uncle Franklin and Timothy's parents, Patricia and Walter. Regina's business partner Stephanie was also there, looking elegant in a black cocktail dress, her red hair swept into an updo. "Let me get you both a drink," Regina said, leading us toward a bar cart laden with top-shelf liquor. "Then I simply must show you the renovations. We just finished the East Wing." For the next 20 minutes, Regina paraded us through room after room of her newly remodeled home, pointing out custom fixtures and handcrafted furniture with price tags that made my stomach clench. Marcus nodded appreciatively while I trailed behind, wondering how much of this extravagance was being properly reported on their tax returns. As we approached what Regina called her home office suite, I noticed Timothy hurriedly emerging from the room, closing the door behind him. He looked startled to see us. "Oh, we don't need to see in there," he said quickly. "It's a mess with all Regina's work papers." Through the briefly open door, I glimpsed Stephanie hastily gathering documents from a large desk. Something about their behavior set off alarm bells in my professional instincts. "What kind of work do you bring home?" I asked casually. Regina waved dismissively. "Oh, just some property assessments and investment projections. Nothing that would interest you, darling." As we moved on, I heard Stephanie's hushed voice from inside the office. "We need to fix these books before anyone sees them." The timing couldn't be worse. My heart began to pound. The company name hadn't been mentioned, but a terrible suspicion was forming in my mind. Crown Heights Properties was a major real estate development firm in our region. Could it possibly be Regina's company? During cocktail hour, I found myself standing awkwardly near the fireplace while Regina held court, describing her company's latest luxury condominium project. "We've pre-sold 60% of the units already, at an average of $1.2 million each," she announced to appreciative murmurs from the group. "That's quite an achievement," Timothy's father Walter said, raising his glass. "Always knew you had the Midas touch, Regina." "It's all about relationships and knowing when to bend the rules," Regina replied with a wink. I nearly choked on my drink. In my line of work, bending rules was often code for tax evasion or financial fraud. I glanced at Marcus, who was deep in conversation with his cousin Gabriel across the room, oblivious to my growing discomfort. Stephanie sidled up beside me, her expression tense despite her social smile. "So, Allison, Regina tells me you work for the government?" "That's right," I replied carefully. "I'm an accountant with the IRS." A flash of something anxiety? Fear? Crossed her face before she composed herself. How fascinating. I imagine that must be very structured work. "It has its moments," I said, watching her closely. "Especially when we're investigating major cases." Stephanie's knuckles whitened around her glass. "Major cases? How interesting. What sort of criteria would trigger something like that?" Before I could answer, Regina swept over, linking her arm through Stephanie's. "Are you boring poor Allison with business talk? Come, dinner's ready to be served." As we moved toward the dining room, I caught Timothy giving Stephanie a questioning look, to which she responded with a subtle shake of her head. The knot in my stomach tightened. Something was definitely off. The dining table was a showcase of Regina's wealth: fine china, crystal glasses, silver candlesticks, and elaborate flower arrangements. I found my place card between Marcus and Franklin, directly across from Regina and Timothy. Stephanie sat at the far end, now looking visibly tense. Throughout the appetizer course, I tried to focus on the conversation around me, but my mind kept returning to the snippets I'd overheard and the suspicious behavior I'd witnessed. If Regina's company was indeed Crown Heights Properties, I was sitting across from the subject of my investigation, sharing roasted beet salad and pretending everything was normal. I excused myself to use the restroom, needing a moment to collect my thoughts. In the hallway, I took a wrong turn and found myself near the home office I'd glimpsed earlier. The door was slightly ajar, and my professional instincts took over. Glancing quickly to ensure I was alone, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The large desk was mostly cleared now, but a folder had been left behind in what appeared to be a hasty cleanup. The label on the tab read, Crown Heights Properties, Tax Planning 2024 to 2025. My suspicion confirmed. I felt a cold wave of realization wash over me. Tomorrow, I would be leading an investigation into my sister-in-law's company. I returned to the dining room just as the main course was being served by the catering staff Regina had hired for the evening. A perfectly cooked beef tenderloin with truffle mashed potatoes and asparagus was placed before each guest, along with a fresh pour of what Timothy announced was a $300 bottle of Cabernet from our recent Napa Valley trip. My appetite had vanished completely, but I pushed food around my plate and sipped water, trying to appear normal while my mind raced with the implications of what I discovered. So, Allison, Walter said from the end of the table, Marcus tells me you recently received a promotion. Congratulations. Before I could respond, Regina cut in. Yes, moving up in the world of government work. From what cubicle to which cubicle was it again? A few uncomfortable chuckles circled the table. Marcus frowned, but remained silent. Actually, I replied evenly, I was promoted to senior investigative accountant. It involves leading major financial investigations. Patricia leaned forward with genuine interest. That sounds quite impressive. What sort of investigations do you handle? I opened my mouth to give a general answer when Regina laughed loudly. Oh, Mother Timothy, don't encourage her. It's all just pushing papers and checking math on tax returns. She turned to the table at large. Let me tell you about Allison's exciting life. The room seemed to shrink as Regina stood, wine glass in hand. She's just a simple accountant, folks. Her voice took on a mocking tone. She gets up every morning, puts on her sensible shoes and her government-approved blazer, drives her economic car to her little cubicle, and spends 8 hours making sure ordinary people haven't claimed too many deductions on their tax returns. My cheeks burned as Regina continued, gesturing dramatically. While some of us are closing multi-million-dollar deals and creating actual value in the economy, Allison is making sure some poor teacher didn't write off too many classroom supplies. She raised her glass. To the exciting life of government work. The table erupted in laughter. Even Marcus, after an initial hesitation, chuckled along, shooting me an apologetic look that did nothing to ease the humiliation burning through me. Regina, Timothy said weakly, perhaps that's enough. Oh, please. She knows I'm just having fun, Regina replied, waving away his concern. Allison understands that not everyone can be a business success. Someone has to do the boring jobs, right, Allison? I sat frozen, my hands clenched in my lap under the table, as memories of similar moments flooded back. Regina at Marcus's and my wedding reception, loudly wondering if we could afford a honeymoon on government cheese. Regina at last year's Thanksgiving, suggesting my practical gift of books for her children showed a typical government worker's thriftiness. Regina at every family gathering, finding new ways to diminish my career choices while elevating her own. Actually, I finally managed to say, my voice smaller than I intended, my work is quite complex and important to ensuring our tax system functions fairly. Of course it is, sweetie, Regina replied in the condescending tone one might use with a child. We're all very impressed with your adding and subtracting. More laughter rippled around the table. I glanced at Marcus, silently pleading for support, but he was studying his plate intently, a weak smile on his face. "Excuse me," I murmured, standing up so quickly my chair nearly toppled backward. "I need some air." I hurried from the dining room, bypassing the powder room and heading straight for the guest bathroom at the far end of the hallway, where I could have some privacy. Locking the door behind me, I leaned against the sink and finally let the tears come, hot and humiliating. The bathroom was absurdly luxurious, with marble countertops and gold fixtures. Even here, I couldn't escape the reminder of Regina's success and her disdain for my choices. As I dabbed at my eyes with a monogrammed hand towel, something on the counter caught my attention. A stack of papers had been hastily shoved behind a decorative vase, as if someone had been reviewing them in private and stashed them when interrupted. The top page bore Crown Heights Properties logo and what appeared to be financial projections for the upcoming quarter. With trembling hands, I lifted the papers. These weren't just any financial documents. They were internal projections showing significantly higher revenue figures than what appeared in the preliminary tax filings I'd reviewed at work. One page detailed what could only be described as a dual bookkeeping system, with columns labeled reported and actual. This was evidence of exactly the kind of fraud I was tasked with investigating. And it had fallen right into my lap, in my sister-in-law's guest bathroom, on the eve of my formal investigation. I quickly took photos of several pages with my phone, then carefully replaced the documents exactly as I'd found them. My tears had dried, replaced by a cold, professional focus. This was no longer just about Regina's cruelty or my hurt feelings. This was potential criminal activity. When I returned to the table, dessert was being served, an elaborate chocolate creation that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Regina barely acknowledged my return, now regaling the table with stories of her recent business trip to Tokyo. The Japanese investors were so impressed with our presentation that they committed an additional $5 million on the spot, she was saying. Of course, not everyone understands how to move in those circles. Her eyes flicked to me briefly, the implication clear. I sat silently, picking at my dessert, a strange calm having replaced my earlier humiliation. I now possessed information that Regina would be horrified to know I had. But professional ethics prevented me from using it as the personal weapon it could have been. Marcus reached under the table and squeezed my hand, misinterpreting my silence as continued hurt. In reality, I was mentally cataloging everything I'd seen and heard that evening, preparing for what would now be a highly complicated investigation. As Regina finished her third glass of wine, her jabs at my career became even less subtle. "You know what I find fascinating?" she said, addressing the table at large but looking directly at me. "How some people seem content with mediocrity. No ambition to rise above pushing papers and collecting a safe little paycheck." Timothy shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Let's change the subject, shall we? Gabriel, how's that new boat working out?" But Regina wasn't finished. "I built my company from nothing, took risks, made tough decisions. That's what separates entrepreneurs from." She waved her hand dismissively in my direction. "Paper pushers." I felt a buzz in my pocket and excused myself to check my phone. It was a text from Gerald. "Need to confirm 9 a.m. start at Crown Heights tomorrow. Bringing additional forensic team based on new intel. Critical case." My heart raced as I typed a quick confirmation. When I returned to the table, Regina was in the middle of explaining how she'd recently restructured some assets to optimize tax implications. "The key is knowing which properties to shift between entities and when," she was saying to an attentive Franklin. "Our accountant has been brilliant at finding creative solutions." Stephanie, who had been quiet most of the evening, suddenly looked pale. "Regina, perhaps business talk isn't appropriate for a family dinner." "Nonsense," Regina replied. "It's not like anyone here would understand the complexities anyway." She shot another pointed look my way. "Some people only know how to follow rules, not how to work around them." I took a slow sip of water, weighing my options. Professional ethics dictated that I should recuse myself from tomorrow's investigation due to the personal connection. But I also had a duty to report the evidence of fraud I discovered. Regina, I said carefully, your company sounds fascinating. What was the name again? I don't think you've ever mentioned it specifically. A flicker of unease crossed her face. Crown Heights Properties. We're the largest luxury real estate developer in 3 counties. She recovered quickly, adding, not that you'd be in our target demographic, of course. The confirmation hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd already suspected it. Marcus looked over, noticing my sudden tension. Everything okay? He whispered. Fine. I replied automatically, though nothing was fine. I was sitting across from the subject of a major fraud investigation, who also happened to be my sister-in-law, who was actively mocking my profession without realizing I was about to investigate her company. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Gerald, sending Leonard over with preliminary documents you requested. He has your address, but said you're at a family dinner? I excused myself once more, stepping into the hallway to call Gerald directly. I can't talk long, I said quietly when he answered. There's a complication with tomorrow's investigation. I'm currently at a family dinner at the home of Crown Heights owner. What? Gerald's shock was evident. Regina Blackwell is your sister-in-law? The Regina Blackwell we've been investigating for months. Yes. I didn't make the connection until tonight. She's married to my husband's brother. A long pause followed. This changes things, Allison. You'll need to recuse yourself. I know. But there's more. I've accidentally discovered evidence of dual bookkeeping. They're definitely hiding income. Document everything, Gerald instructed. Leonard is on his way to your location with the files you requested earlier. I'll tell him to be discreet, but we need to move forward with this investigation immediately. When I returned to the table, dessert was finishing. Regina had moved on to making veiled comments about government inefficiency. The problem with bureaucrats, she was saying, is they have no understanding of how business actually works. They just blindly follow regulations created by other bureaucrats. Marcus caught my eye, finally seeming to realize how inappropriate his sister's behavior had become. Regina, that's enough. Allison's work is important and challenging. Oh, please, Regina laughed dismissively. She pushes papers all day. Those who can do, those who can't, work for the government. More laughter around the table, though it seemed less enthusiastic now, with several guests looking uncomfortable. Actually, Marcus continued, his voice stronger, Allison recently received a major promotion. She leads complex financial investigations. How fascinating, Regina said, her tone making clear she found it anything but. I'm sure checking math on tax returns requires tremendous skill. Stephanie, looking increasingly agitated, abruptly stood. I need some air. Excuse me. She hurried from the room, her face ashen. Timothy watched her go with evident concern, then turned to Regina. Perhaps we should move to the living room for coffee? Regina ignored him, her attention fixed on me now. Tell us, Allison, what's the most exciting thing that's happened in your career lately? Did someone file a Form 1040 instead of a 1040 easy? The table fell uncomfortably silent. I met her gaze steadily, my professional demeanor sliding into place despite the personal attack. Actually, Regina, I've recently been assigned as lead investigator on a major tax fraud case. The company in question has apparently been maintaining 2 sets of books and misrepresenting millions in revenue. Regina's smile faltered slightly. How terribly boring for you. The doorbell rang, its chime echoing through the suddenly silent dining room. Who could that be? Timothy wondered aloud, half rising. I'll get it, Regina said, clearly eager to escape the tension that had developed. It's probably Caroline from next door borrowing sugar again. As Regina left the room, Marcus leaned close to me. I'm sorry about all this. She's being worse than usual tonight. I nodded, my attention focused on the hallway where voices could now be heard. One belonged to Regina. The other, deeper voice I recognized as Leonard Bennett, my colleague from the Financial Crimes Division. Regina's voice carried down the hallway, her tone immediately shifting to the saccharine one she reserved for people she wanted to impress. "Good evening, sir. How can I help you?" "Good evening, ma'am," Leonard's professional baritone replied. "I'm looking for Allison Wright. I was told she's here for a family dinner." The dining room fell silent as everyone strained to hear the conversation at the front door. I sat frozen, knowing what was about to unfold but powerless to stop it. "Allison." Regina's voice took on a dismissive edge. "What business do you have with her?" "I have urgent documents she needs to review before tomorrow morning," Leonard explained. "It's regarding a federal investigation." I could picture Regina's patronizing smile, the one she always wore when discussing my career. Timothy half rose from his seat, looking concerned. "She's just a simple accountant," Regina said, her voice now clearly audible to everyone at the table. "Whatever government paperwork you have can surely wait until Monday." There was a pause, and I knew without seeing that Leonard would be standing straighter, his expression shifting to what we in the office called his federal face. Simple. Leonard's voice was calm but carried a weight of authority that silenced the room. "She's the federal auditor scheduled to investigate your company tomorrow. And based on our preliminary findings, Mrs. Blackwell, you should be very concerned." The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the ticking of the ornate grandfather clock in the hallway and the soft gasp from Stephanie at the end of the table. Regina appeared in the dining room doorway, her face drained of color, Leonard standing behind her with a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. Her eyes found mine, widening with a mixture of shock, confusion, and the first flickers of fear. "What is he talking about, Allison?" Her voice had lost its usual confident edge. I stood slowly, smoothing my napkin on the table. "Leonard, I didn't expect you to come here. I thought we were meeting tomorrow." Leonard stepped around a still frozen Regina. "Gerald thought you should see these tonight. The situation has escalated." He handed me the portfolio, his expression grave. "We've received additional documentation from a whistleblower at Crown Heights that confirms our suspicions. The investigation has been upgraded to include potential money laundering." Timothy knocked over his wine glass, sending red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth. "Money laundering? Regina, what the hell is going on?" Stephanie suddenly stood, wobbling slightly. "I need to. I don't feel well." She rushed from the room, hand over her mouth. Regina remained in the doorway, her usual poise completely shattered. "This is ridiculous. There must be some mistake." She turned to me, her expression hardening. "Is this some kind of twisted revenge for a few harmless jokes, Allison?" The accusation stung, but I maintained my professional composure. "This investigation has been ongoing for months, Regina. I only realized tonight that Crown Heights was your company." I opened the portfolio, scanning the documents inside. "And based on what I'm seeing here and what I accidentally discovered in your guest bathroom, the concerns appear to be valid." "You went through my personal papers?" Regina's voice rose shrilly. "They were left out in plain sight," I replied calmly. "And as a federal agent who has reasonable suspicion of tax fraud, I had both the right and obligation to note their contents." Marcus stood beside me, his face a mask of confusion. "Allison, what's happening? Are you really investigating Regina's company?" "I was assigned the case 2 weeks ago," I explained. "I had no idea it was Regina's company until tonight." Timothy approached his wife, his face ashen. "Regina, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you haven't been cooking the books." Regina's shock was rapidly transforming into calculated damage control. "It's all a misunderstanding," she said, her voice steadying. "Our accounting is complex, but completely legal. Franklin handles all the details." "Franklin Mercer?" Leonard asked sharply. "We've already interviewed Mr. Mercer this afternoon. He's been quite forthcoming about the creative accounting he was instructed to implement." Regina's composure crumbled entirely. "He wouldn't dare. I paid him well to ensure everything was properly managed." "To commit fraud on your behalf," I corrected quietly, still reviewing the documents Leonard had brought. "The evidence was damning. Bank statements showing deposits that never appeared in tax filings, property transfers between shell companies designed to hide assets, and emails from Regina explicitly instructing Franklin to make the numbers work, regardless of reality. The family members around the table watched in stunned silence. Judith was whispering frantically to Gabriel. Patricia had her hand pressed to her mouth in shock. Walter looked thunderous, his earlier pride in Regina's business acumen transformed to anger. "I think," Franklin said slowly, "that we should all calm down and discuss this privately." He turned to the table. "The rest of you should probably leave. This appears to be a sensitive matter." Judith and Gabriel needed no further encouragement, quickly gathering their things and making awkward goodbyes. Patricia and Walter lingered, concern for their son evident, but Timothy tersely suggested they head home. "I'll call you tomorrow," he promised, not meeting their eyes. As the other guests hurriedly departed, Timothy rounded on Regina. "Tell me exactly what you've done."
Now.
Regina's eyes darted between Timothy, Leonard, and me. Then, with a sudden shift in demeanor, she laughed brittlely and approached me, lowering her voice. "Allison, be reasonable. We're family. Surely there's some arrangement we can come to." Her hand touched my arm. "I've always admired your integrity. Perhaps you could use your position to guide us through this little misunderstanding." Leonard stepped forward. "Mrs. Blackwell, are you attempting to influence a federal investigation? Because I should warn you, that would constitute an additional felony." Regina withdrew her hand as if burned. "Of course not. I'm simply asking my sister-in-law for professional advice. I need to recuse myself from this case immediately," I said, addressing Leonard while stepping away from Regina. "The personal connection creates a conflict of interest." "Agreed," Leonard nodded. "But the investigation will proceed as scheduled. I'll need to take your preliminary notes and observations now." Stephanie reappeared, her face tear-streaked. "Regina, they contacted Franklin. He told them everything." Her voice broke. "He told them about the offshore accounts, the false invoices, all of it." Timothy sank into a chair, his head in his hands.
Jesus Christ, Regina.
"What have you done?" Regina's carefully maintained facade finally shattered completely. "What I had to do," she shouted. "Do you think all this comes easy?" She gestured wildly around her lavish home. "The market was crashing. We were going to lose everything. I made decisions to protect us, to protect our lifestyle. By breaking the law," Timothy said flatly. "By risking prison." Marcus, who had been watching the scene unfold in stunned silence, finally found his voice. "Allison, did you know about this before tonight?"
No, I answered truthfully.
"I knew I was investigating a company called Crown Heights Properties, but I never connected it to Regina. She's never mentioned her company name before." Regina laughed bitterly. "Of course not. Why would I discuss business with a simple accountant?" The cruel joke that had humiliated me earlier now echoed back with ironic weight. The simple accountant had uncovered what appeared to be millions in tax fraud, and Regina's carefully constructed world was crumbling around her. Leonard cleared his throat, breaking the tense silence that had fallen over the dining room. "Mrs. Wright, I need to speak with you privately about your recusal and the transition of the case." I nodded, following him to a corner of the room while Regina hissed urgent instructions to Stephanie, who was frantically texting someone. "Given the circumstances, you'll need to formally recuse yourself first thing tomorrow," Leonard explained quietly. "All evidence you've observed tonight, including the documents you photographed, will need to be properly logged through official channels." "I understand completely," I assured him. "I'll prepare a full report tonight and submit everything through the proper protocols." Across the room, Regina's desperate damage control continued. "Call Samuel," she urged Timothy. "He'll know which judge to contact. We can get an injunction, delay the investigation until we can fix this." Timothy stared at his wife, as if seeing her for the first time. "Fix this? Regina, they have evidence. They have Franklin's testimony. There's nothing to fix." "There's always something to fix if you throw enough money at it," Regina snapped, her voice rising. "Allison, come here." I rejoined the group, maintaining a professional distance. Regina's eyes were calculating despite her obvious panic. How much would it take? She asked bluntly. Excuse me? Don't play naive. How much would it take to make this go away? Name your price. Regina reached for her purse. I can write a check right now. Leonard stepped forward immediately. Mrs. Blackwell, I need to warn you that you're now attempting to bribe a federal officer. That's a serious crime on top of the charges already being considered. Regina ignored him, her gaze fixed on me. We're family, Allison. After everything I've done for you and Marcus. Everything you've done? Marcus interjected incredulously. Regina, all you've ever done is belittle Allison and treat her like she's beneath you. I gave you a job when you needed one, Regina shot back. I loaned you money for your down payment, which we repaid in full, with interest, Marcus countered. And I worked hard for that salary. I placed a restraining hand on Marcus's arm. This isn't helping the situation. To Regina, I said firmly, I cannot and will not interfere with a federal investigation. The evidence will be processed according to law. My professional ethics don't allow for any other outcome. Ethics. Regina spat the word like it tasted bitter. Ethics don't buy vacation homes or designer clothes or respect. No, I agreed quietly. But they let me sleep at night. Stephanie, who had been pacing nervously by the window, suddenly broke down. I can't do this anymore. I can't. She turned to Timothy, tears streaming down her face. I tried to stop her. I told her the offshore accounts were too risky, that the shell companies were too obvious. But she and Franklin kept pushing forward. You knew about this? Timothy asked, his voice hollow. Stephanie nodded miserably. Not everything. Not at first. But enough. I convinced myself it was just aggressive tax planning, not actual fraud. But then the documents started disappearing, and Franklin started talking about creative solutions, and suddenly we were falsifying invoices and backdating contracts. Regina's face contorted with rage. Shut up, Stephanie. Not another word. But Stephanie continued, the words pouring out now. The Tokyo investors Regina bragged about earlier? They don't exist. We've been shifting money between accounts to make it look like new investment. The Westlake project is underwater, the Clayton Heights development is built on land we don't fully own, and the tax documents for the past 3 years have all been falsified. Regina lunged at Stephanie, but Timothy caught her arm. Stop it. You've done enough damage. Leonard had been quietly taking notes throughout this exchange. Miss Stephanie Keller, is it? I believe we'll need to continue this conversation formally tomorrow. Your cooperation could be significant in determining charges. Marcus put his arm around my shoulders. I think we need to leave.
Now.
I nodded, gathering my purse and the portfolio Leonard had brought. I'll need to contact Gerald immediately and formally recuse myself from this investigation. As we prepared to leave, Regina made one last desperate attempt. Allison, please. We can work something out. I'll never say another word about your job. I'll respect your career choices. Just help me make this go away. I looked at the woman who had belittled me for years, now reduced to begging for the help of this simple accountant she'd mocked just hours earlier. I can't do that, Regina. The investigation will proceed, but with another lead agent. In the car, the silence was deafening. Marcus gripped the steering wheel, so tightly his knuckles were white. I had no idea, he finally said. About any of it. Regina's fraud, your investigation, none of it. I know, I assured him. I didn't make the connection myself until tonight. All these years, he continued, his voice hollow, she's been looking down on you, acting superior when she was actually a criminal. And I never stood up to her.
Not really.
I placed my hand on his arm. Tonight you did. Too little, too late. He shook his head in disgust. I should have shut her down years ago, the first time she made one of her snide comments. We drove in silence for several minutes before Marcus spoke again. What happens now? With Regina, I mean. I'll recuse myself immediately, I explained. The case will be reassigned, probably to Monica, who has similar experience. The investigation will proceed based on evidence, and if the fraud is as extensive as it appears, Regina and possibly Stephanie will face serious charges. And Franklin? The accountant. He's apparently already cooperating. That usually means a plea deal with reduced charges. When we arrived home, I immediately called Gerald and explained the entire situation. He agreed with my recusal and arranged for Monica to take over the case. I sent him the photos I'd taken of the documents in Regina's bathroom and promised a full written report by morning. After hanging up, I sat heavily on our living room couch, the events of the evening crashing over me. "What a night," I murmured. Marcus brought me a glass of wine and sat beside me. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "For all of it. For not standing up to Regina all these years. For letting her treat you that way." "It's not entirely your fault," I replied, though part of me had always resented his passive acceptance of his sister's behavior. "Yes, it is," he insisted. "She's my sister, which made it my responsibility to set boundaries. I failed you there." I leaned against his shoulder, too emotionally exhausted to argue. "What do you think will happen to them?" Marcus sighed deeply. "Based on what Stephanie revealed, prison time seems likely. At minimum, they'll lose the business, probably most of their assets." The thought brought no satisfaction, only a complicated mixture of professional vindication and personal sadness for the family chaos that would follow. "I never wanted this," I said softly. "I never wanted to be the one to bring down your sister." "You didn't," Marcus replied firmly. "Regina brought herself down. You were just doing your job, the important, complex job she's spent years mocking." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. The simple accountant had discovered what Regina's wealth and success had been built on: lies, fraud, and criminal activity. Monday morning arrived with a surreal quality. While my colleagues buzzed about the Crown Heights investigation, I sat in Gerald's office, formally signing the recusal documents. "You handled this with remarkable professionalism, Allison," Gerald said, reviewing my detailed report. "Lesser agents might have been tempted to use their position inappropriately, given the personal connection." "Never crossed my mind," I replied honestly. "The integrity of the investigation is paramount." Gerald nodded approvingly. "I've assigned Monica as lead. She's been briefed on all aspects of the case, including the unusual circumstances of discovery." Monica was waiting outside Gerald's office, her expression sympathetic. "Quite a family dinner you had," she commented as we walked toward the conference room where the investigative team was gathering. "One for the record books," I agreed wryly. Over the following weeks, the case against Crown Heights Properties unfolded with devastating thoroughness. Franklin Mercer, Regina's accountant, provided prosecutors with years of documentation detailing systematic tax evasion, falsified records, and illegal property transactions. In exchange for his cooperation, he received a reduced sentence of 2 years. Stephanie Keller also cooperated, revealing that she had objected to many of Regina's schemes, but had ultimately gone along out of loyalty and fear of losing her position. She faced lesser charges, but still significant financial penalties. The family fallout was as severe as I'd expected. Timothy filed for separation, his reputation in the business community tarnished by association. Regina was indicted on 17 counts of tax fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. Crown Heights Properties was placed into receivership, its assets frozen pending the outcome of the trial. Marcus struggled with the public humiliation and his conflicted feelings about his sister. But to my surprise, he finally found his voice. When Regina called, demanding he convince me to somehow intervene, he firmly refused. "You did this to yourself," I overheard him saying on the phone. "Allison is one of the most ethical people I know, and the way you've treated her over the years was inexcusable. Even now, you're not sorry for what you did, only that you got caught." After he hung up, he looked both drained and somehow lighter. "That felt long overdue," he admitted. At work, I was surprised to find my handling of the Crown Heights situation had earned me significant respect. Gerald called me into his office a month after the investigation became public. "The director was impressed by your ethical handling of the Crown Heights case," he informed me. There's an opening for division supervisor in the Special Investigations Unit. I've recommended you for the position. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase and leadership of a specialized team focusing on complex financial crimes. The irony wasn't lost on me. Regina's mockery of my simple accounting job had inadvertently led to a career advancement that put me in charge of investigations even more significant than hers. The most unexpected development came 6 months later when Timothy reached out to Marcus suggesting a family Thanksgiving dinner, the first since the incident, as everyone now referred to it. Regina won't be there, Timothy explained when we arrived at what had once been his and Regina's mansion, now significantly downsized following asset seizures. She's still awaiting trial, but her lawyers arranged for her to stay with her parents. The dinner was awkward at first, with Patricia and Walter clearly uncomfortable around me. But as the evening progressed, Timothy made a point of asking about my work, showing genuine interest in my recent promotion. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly, while helping me clear plates from the table. "I sat through years of Regina belittling you, and I never said a word." "You weren't the only one," I replied, glancing at Marcus.
Still,
I knew some of what was happening with the company. Not all of it, but enough that I should have asked questions. He shook his head. I chose to look the other way because I enjoyed the lifestyle. In a sense, I'm as guilty as she is. His honesty was unexpected and appreciated. "What will you do now?" I asked. "Start over," he said simply, "with a legitimate business and a much smaller house." 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, I received a letter from Regina. I almost didn't open it, expecting more accusations or pleas for help. Instead, I found something unexpected, what appeared to be a genuine apology. "I've had a lot of time to think," she wrote. "My actions weren't just illegal, they were a betrayal of the values our parents taught us. Worst of all was how I treated you. My mockery came from my own insecurity. Deep down, I envied your integrity, the respect you earned through honest work rather than wealth and showing off. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what true success looks like. It looks like you." I shared the letter with Marcus, who read it with raised eyebrows. "Do you think she means it?" "I'm not sure," I admitted, "but it's a start." The following spring, I was invited to speak to a class of accounting students at the local university about ethics in financial investigation. Looking out at the eager faces, I shared the most important lesson from my experience. "Technical skills matter in this profession," I told them, "but integrity matters more. There will be moments in your career when doing the right thing is difficult, when personal connections conflict with professional responsibilities. In those moments, remember that your reputation and self-respect are worth more than any short-term advantage." After the lecture, a young woman approached me. "I want to work for the IRS someday in financial crimes," she said enthusiastically. "But my family keeps telling me I should go into private practice where the money is better." I smiled, recognizing a younger version of myself in her earnest expression. "The work we do ensures that everyone plays by the same rules, that the tax system that funds our schools, roads, and social safety net functions fairly. There's value in that beyond any paycheck." Back in my office, now considerably larger than the cubicle Regina had mocked, I found a notice that Regina's case had been resolved through a plea agreement. She would serve 3 years in federal prison followed by 5 years of supervised release and make restitution of over $12 million in back taxes and penalties. I felt no satisfaction at the news, only a complicated sadness for the family trauma her actions had caused. But I also felt something I hadn't expected, pride in my role upholding the financial integrity that keeps our system functioning. That evening, as Marcus and I celebrated my recent promotion with a dinner that, while not extravagant by Regina's standards, was perfect for us, I reflected on how differently I now viewed this simple accountant joke that had once humiliated me. "You know," I told Marcus, raising my glass, "being a simple accountant who believes in doing things right turns out to be a pretty good way to live." He clinked his glass against mine. "To the not-so-simple accountant who taught us all about integrity." I hope my story resonates with some of you out there. Have you ever been underestimated or mocked for your career choice, only to be vindicated later? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if you found this story meaningful, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about standing your ground and maintaining your integrity when it counts. Share this with someone who might need a reminder that doing the right thing matters, even when it's difficult. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth isn't determined by others' perceptions, but by your own actions and integrity.